All right, hello, everybody. Welcome to the Political Vigilante. My name is Graham Elwood. I'm joined here by the creator of Status Coup and Jordan Chariton, who also has a new article in the Intercept saying that the DNC was actively involved in creating the shadow app, which we covered on this show. Most of us in indie media lefties covered this, how the shadow app was really nefarious. But Jordan, so welcome to the show, and tell us what you've discovered. I mean, this is a pretty profound article that just came out in the Intercept, and tell us what you found and how you see this.
Well, Graham, I'm very happy to have you as my shadow in these trying times. So basically, as we know, there was a real to-do at the Iowa caucus. I was there. The DNC decided that unlike the good old days where you just called in the results from each precinct when there was no issue with that, we needed to develop an app ahead of 2020. So after this whole meltdown at the Iowa caucus, there was attorneys hired to investigate it, air quotes on the investigate. And the attorney, there was two attorneys hired. One was a former U.S. attorney appointed by President Obama. The other was the former Iowa Attorney General, who's a Democratic Party lifer. And I found last week, Politico reported on their findings, and the story kind of seemed like it was written by the DNC, or at least Politico got its talking points from the DNC. So, fortunately for me, having traveled so much and covered politics, I developed sources in Iowa, and a source had told me, "Oh yeah, when Politico's story came out, we were in the middle of an Iowa Democratic Party meeting." The state Democratic Party, like the Iowa DNC, was meeting, and they just got the report, but before they could read it, it was already out in Politico. So I was fortunate. I got a transcript of this private meeting, which actually showed what really happened rather than Politico's DNC press release. So some details to give you the bullets. Number one, the DNC, actually the correct results were known on the evening of the Iowa caucus. The results were basically a tie between Mayor CIA, Pete Buttigieg, and Bernie Sanders. I find those numbers a little questionable, but putting that aside, it was a tie. And the app was reporting the numbers correctly, and the state party had the numbers correctly. But Tom Perez and the DNC mandated that the state party not announce the results. We also found out that Tom Perez and the DNC, they basically demanded that this shadow app, 2 weeks before the Iowa caucus, create a new software that would allow the DNC to have access to the raw real-time numbers on caucus night before they were made public. So then you have to start wondering, why does the DNC need access to the raw numbers before the public? You know who else gets access to raw political numbers as they're coming in? The mafia, Mexican drug cartels, like seriously. So basically what I found through the transcript was, number one, the results were known on the night of the caucus, but Tom Perez stopped the Iowa State Democratic Party from reporting them. That those results were basically a 1/10 of 1 point differential between Bernie and Pete. This delay, Tom Perez blocking them from reporting the results, allowed Buttigieg, if you remember, to go out with this audacity and claim victory. And then the media ran with that narrative that he won, and they didn't report the full results for like 4 or 5 days after the caucus, even though they knew the results on the night of the caucus. That made a difference. I went to New Hampshire next to cover that primary. Pete got a 10-point bump in the New Hampshire polls after being proclaimed the Iowa caucus winner, even though we knew on the night of the caucus, the state party had the right results, but the DNC blocked them from releasing it. Other things that came out in this private meeting were, number two, Essentially, the DNC refused to cooperate with the investigation. Again, air quotes. They wouldn't talk to the investigators. They refused through their attorneys to talk to the investigators. And from what I am told, the Iowa State Party thinks the DNC leaked the report to Politico before the Iowa State Party members even got to read it. So how do you have an investigation or find anything, Graham, if you can't speak with Tom Perez, if you can't speak with the people involved? We also found out from this private meeting, the transcripts, these investigators did not ask for any emails from the DNC, any phone calls from no legal process. There was no compelling of emails, phone calls, text messages. So basically we have an investigation without the main people we're investigating, the DNC. And there was some other stuff. The Iowa State Party was openly saying, well, the DNC is just trying to get rid of us. They want to get rid of caucuses. They want to get rid of the Iowa State, Iowa's first in the nation status, which they take very seriously. They're very proud to have the first caucus. So there's a lot more to it. But basically, this private meeting showed that I found the election fraud. It's not in Rudy Giuliani's hair dye. It was in Iowa. And I really think, we have a lot of debates going on in the progressive movement, force the vote, all these other things. But all these things don't matter if we can't have free and fair elections. And I think what I reported, thanks to the Intercept for doing it, was this thing was rigged and then some.
Well, it's fascinating that none of this is shocking to me in the sense of just watching how the DNC operates. I mean, also too, I talked about in the show that it was shown that Pete Buttigieg had helped with the funding with the creation of the shadow app, which that right there is like no candidate should be creating proprietary software that can be used in an election that they're running in. So this is, I mean, there's so many questions that came out of the Democratic primary. I mean, there was the shadow app that many of us all had questions of back when this, almost a year ago now, when this happened. Then there were all of this Joe-mentum in many districts where they used the touchscreen voting, where there were double-digit Bernie Sanders exit poll wins, and then Biden somehow won. And that's like the UN has said that is a earmark for fraud, basically, is what the UN has said about that. So how do you see this? First of all, how do we reconcile this now? We are less than a month away from Joe Biden being sworn in. So how do we rectify? Is the whole primary is a sham? Should we redo it? Does Bernie Sanders, should he get the nomination again? Should we have another runoff between these two? And also the question that's been asked, if the DNC is cheating in their own primary, did they then cheat in the general?
Well, I think we need to move backwards and first evaluate the question of what is the DNC? I don't know if most people don't realize this. It's a private corporation. It's not a governmental body. So they aren't regulated by, not that governmental organizations actually follow regulations either, but it's a private corporation. So according to them, we heard it in 2016, we hear it in 2020, that they are neutral. But one has to wonder, why is the Democratic National Committee involved in election nights, whether a caucus or primary, in the first place? The way our system works is state by state. The state parties are supposed to run their elections. Right. Now, the state parties, are kind of, servants to the DNC because a lot of their funding and their fundraising is dependent on the DNC. But the state parties are supposed to run the elections. I don't agree with that. I think we need one independent federal system, not state by state, but that's a different discussion.
Yeah, let me interject that real quick to agree with you. First of all, it is insane that political parties, these two corrupt political parties, are involved in our politicals. Like they should be as far away from this as possible. Like they can send representatives to watch people count votes or whatever, fine. But the fact that they run this, and we also, you covered this too in 2016, the DNC lawsuit, in their own charter, they're going against their own. Yes, they're a private corporation, which is most people don't know that. They're even going against their own charter.
Right.
So this whole system is nonsense. But I'm sorry to interrupt.
So it basically gets down to, common sense would ask, number one, and James Zogby, who's a 28-year DNC member, was quoted in my piece, why did the DNC need access to the numbers? Why? Politico didn't ask. Why did they demand that this app give them access to the raw numbers? Now, I'm a journalist. I'm not going to be a conspiracy theorist, but why would you want access to the real numbers? To confirm them? Is the DNC the one that should be confirming the raw numbers? Or is the state party that has its members at different precincts, they be the one that confirm it? We know the state parties are corrupt too, but just hang with me for a second. The DNC didn't want the raw numbers to, do an algebra problem. They wanted to see if a certain somebody was winning. I mean, let's just call it what it is. This is added to the fact that for the first time ever, the Holy Grail, the Des Moines Register poll, just suddenly was spiked 3 days before the caucus because Pete Buttigieg's campaign complained because one person polled said, I wasn't given Pete Buttigieg as a complaint. Can you imagine if a Bernie person called and said, I wasn't given Bernie as a choice? You think they would shut down the poll? And that poll leaked and it showed Bernie at first, Pete in third. So the bottom line is, I'm hoping what my reporting shows is, number one, we need the DNC out of the primaries altogether. If we want to allow them to set the time and venue of the debates, fine. They'll manage a way to make that suspect, but that's okay. But they cannot be mandating state parties do anything. They should not be determining whether there's apps involved, which I don't know. I'm all for tech, but I don't know why an app was required when you could just call in the results like they do in every other state. I also, through my reporting, found out they don't do this in any other state. They didn't do this in New Hampshire, heavy-handed over the New Hampshire primary. They didn't do it in Nevada. They didn't do it in South Carolina. So why was the DNC so hell-bent on basically being the puppet master behind Iowa? And I'm a reporter, but I could take an educated guess based on my reporting. Iowa is very influential. Iowa, often the winner of the Iowa caucus wins the nomination. Frankly, Bernie, if you want to say lost Iowa in 2016, barely. His fundraising was even more powerful in 2020. He had more volunteers in 2020. He actually had like 2016 was more upstart ragtag at first. 2020 was pretty, they learned some lessons from 2016. I think they made a hell of a lot of mistakes too in 2020. But the point is, they knew that if Bernie Sanders was declared the winner of the Iowa caucus, then this might be a train that we can't stop. That's absolutely true. Because they saw, look, the polling numbers going into the caucuses were like, if Bernie, and I remember watching people like on CNN say this, like if Bernie runs the table and gets Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, then in Nevada, then he's unstoppable. Then he's just going to steamroll. And they knew that because they had no real thing to go against him. So they had to, it makes perfect sense that they had to manufacture this. So Bernie, Pete, and just Pete, get it close enough so Pete can say he's the winner, which then just draws doubt. They're just like a defense attorney that knows they have a guilty client that's just like put enough doubt into people's brains because most people are not paying attention as much as you and I are and our audiences are. So they just know that if Pete, because if Bernie would have won Iowa, that would have, you knew he was going to win New Hampshire. It was just and then like he was looking good in all these states. And it was like Bernie would have had this thing wrapped up by March. Well, I can tell you, because I lived it. I was in Iowa and I was in New Hampshire. What their desire was worked. Because I remember I was in New Hampshire and, I covered Bernie, but I also wanted to cover the corporate candidates and question some of their voters. So I went to like a local high school on a Sunday and Pete Buttigieg just had a line like down the block. And I was respectful, but, I interviewed these people and I don't know, I would say like if I interviewed 15, 20 people, pretty much every one of them said, yeah, he wasn't on my radar, but he won Iowa. So, I want to check him out. So there is a thing called manufacturing consent, and this is what it was. Pete went out the night of the caucus, even though the state party had the results, which showed he didn't win. It was essentially a tie. We could get into whether those numbers are correct, but it was a tie. He goes out there, he, declares mission accomplished, he wins. He got a 10-point bump. And I would argue what Bernie made mistakes, but what really I think pulled Bernie back was, number one, what we just talked about, the delay in the caucus results, the DNC's fuckery, but Bernie not being declared the winner, or at least, a wash, it's tied. And this delay that allowed Buttigieg only lost New Hampshire by a point because he got that 10-point bump out of this false narrative that he won Iowa. Imagine if Bernie, let's just say it's a tie, and Pete doesn't get to go around calling himself the winner, because it was a tie. It was like 1/10 of a point. Pete doesn't get that 10-point bump. Bernie wins New Hampshire, probably closer to 4 to 5 points, which is a lot more convincing. The media can't then do their narrative. Amy Klobuchar is the winner in third place. Remember that? Right. They were like, that was the big takeaway. She came in third. Frankly, if Bernie wins New Hampshire 4 or 5 points, I think there's more pressure on Warren to drop out.
Right.
So there's a domino effect here. It's possible that he wins Nevada by even more. So frankly, if Bernie wins or is tied in Iowa and then wins New Hampshire by a significant amount, it's probably, and then he clobbers in Nevada. Even if Joe Biden won South Carolina, I think it would be too late at that point if Bernie basically runs the table in all three. So, but to me, it's not just about Bernie. It's about what now. Let's look forward in a 2024 galaxy, and I'll just throw out Nina Turner as a name. Mm-hmm. If the DNC is still allowed to be involved with the decisions on how are they collecting votes, is it an app? Is it phone? Is it smoke signal? If they're allowed to dictate how the state party counts the votes, when the state party delivers the results, you don't think they're going to do this again? Whether it's Kamala Harris as the candidate, Nina Turner as the progressive candidate. So I don't know. I think as progressives, we're all exhausted. We all have to do, whether it's forced to vote, trying to get real stimulus. There's a lot of things on the table, but to me, all of it's for naught if electoral politics wise, we cannot actually get accountability and have free and fair elections. I'm not saying just getting rid of the DNC means it's automatically going to be fair, but the bottom line is the DNC, to me, this is election fraud. There were thousands of people, thousands of volunteers that came into Iowa, not just from other states, but I met volunteers from other countries that came in for Bernie Sanders to knock on doors in fucking freezing Iowa. And they were defrauded. The thousands of people, millions of people that donated to Bernie. And to tell you the truth, it's not just a Bernie issue, all the candidates, even a neoliberal candidate. The DNC delay would hurt every candidate. And there was no reason for this delay, which is what my report exposed. They had the right results on caucus night. And it's a shame. And, frankly, I don't know what Bernie's campaign was thinking. They did the same thing in 2016 after the New York primary fuckery, where 200,000 people are purged. They didn't go to court. They didn't challenge it. They just said, we don't want to look like sore losers. Let's move on to Pennsylvania. This time, same thing. They said, we won the popular vote, whatever. We're moving on. But that's not how the media narrative went. So they should have challenged this declaration. They should have got into court, challenged the numbers, challenged the process, and they didn't. So, and you know who would? For all his warts, Donald Trump would be in court in 5 minutes.
Absolutely. So. Absolutely. And this is the problem. I mean, this is the criticism of Bernie Sanders is every time the DNC screwed him, he just go, I don't want to be a sore loser. I don't want to make waves or whatever. And it's like, well, this is why I find it almost impossible to reform this party from within. And, they just keep doing this. And the vote any blue will do crowd, they seem to be okay with it. They're just like, well, they get all mad at Republican, gerrymandering and suppressing the vote, shutting down polls in black neighborhoods and stuff like that. They get mad at that as well. They should. But then when the Democrats do it, it's that same old, well, if my team cheats, it's okay. And right. I don't know how I totally agree. We got to get these parties out of the primary process, but it almost seems like they're the people who are within these parties who call themselves Democrats are okay with it up to a certain point. They anytime you criticize this, anytime you bring this stuff up, they just like, wow, you're a sore Bernie bro, or whatever they say. It's just like, it's a completely rigged system. Like the whole system is rigged. We don't even have, like, it's just theater.
Well, it wasn't just a primary that was rigged. I mean, look at just this investigation. I mean, first of all, you have partisans doing the investigation. This is a U.S. prosecutor appointed by President Obama. You think he's trying to get to the bottom of DNC fuckery? Then they don't actually interview anyone from the DNC, and they don't raise a stink about it. They just say, okay, well, Tom won't talk to us. We can't get their emails. We can't get their text messages. I mean, there would be a bit of a trail if you had emails. This would be the equivalent of, like, I've covered Flint a lot. This would be the equivalent of, like, Governor Rick Snyder of Michigan or others just telling the criminal investigators, we're busy. We're not going to talk to you. We're not going to give you email. I mean, they tried. They were very evasive. They wouldn't readily hand over documents and stuff. But, like, if it's a governmental body, you don't get to do that. But because it's a private corporation, and because this investigation didn't actually compel anything, so the investigation was nonsense. The findings were there was some criticism of the DNC, but you can't actually really get to the bottom of who's at fault. Was there ill motives? That's the point of an investigation. If you can't get access to the parties involved, their emails, their calls, their text messages. And secondly, the release of this was very suspect. It's in December during the pandemic. Everybody's focused on Trump's craziness, which, by the way, just breaking, LOL, Trump just pardoned Paul Manafort, Roger Stone, and Jared Kushner's father. So chew on that. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, I knew, God, I said it yesterday. We'll just go on a little quick side note here. Yeah, I said it yesterday. That's what this whole give everybody $2,000, which I would like. I'd like for everybody to get $2,000. Like, I think this is more smokescreen for all the awful people he's pardoning.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really care about the motivation as long as the money comes. But yeah, he's corrupt. Not breaking news, but just letting your audience know he just pardoned Roger Stone, Paul Manafort, and Jared Kushner's father, who was busted like over a decade ago with all sorts of financial fuckery. But yeah, I think that the investigation was nonsense. The release is very suspect. They released it. Somehow Politico got it before the Iowa State Democratic Party. So how did Politico get it, if not the DNC? And, Politico's piece was very kind of like a press release for the DNC. Yeah, the DNC did some things wrong, but overall it was a technology issue and blah, blah, blah. So my three questions, first of all, I believe there are progressive attorneys in the country. 2016, there was a lawsuit, a DNC fraud lawsuit. I thought the person who, launched it was a little crazy. He went after me for not covering it wall to wall 24/7, but that's a different story. But I say, listen, this is now 4 years in a row, 2 different primaries. It's not just Iowa where there was fuckery. California had fuckery. A lot of other states had fuckery. It's time to sue. It's time to take them to court, not just civilly, but criminally, because we just had you covered it, I covered it, a 4.5 year Cold War reenactment. Millions of dollars were spent to have a literal criminal investigation into the Russian boogeyman, a special prosecutor, all this stuff. I wasn't opposed to the investigation. I was opposed to the media coverage and propaganda. Yeah, it's fine to investigate it, whatever. But the point is, why is it okay to have a criminal investigation into possible Trump-Russia collusion, but we're not asking for a criminal investigation into, as humbly as I could say it, what I'm revealing is clear tampering with the Iowa caucus? Why would we not have a criminal investigation? But wait, the president-elect would not want that, who, by the way, came, I think, in 4th or 5th place in Iowa, Joe Biden. The Democratic Party doesn't want that. They want to sweep this under the rug. But I'm not a movement leader. I'm just a journalist, but I would definitely suggest that people read the story, because we could push for Medicare for all. And I think we need to do things outside of electoral politics, including economic protests and boycotts. I talked to Richard Wolff yesterday about the more and more likelihood of a general strike, but electorally, we could chip away, we could elect progressives in Congress, this and that. But if we're not, the only way to, if the big seat, the White House, is always going to be rigged, and we're going to have the DNC as, you know, the corrupt big brother, and it's just going to be normalized. Yeah, they rigged 2016, they rigged 2020. What can we do? And nothing's done about it. Then I think, and I also think the corporate media needs to be taken for task, because they have gaslit Bernie Sanders supporters for many years that were conspiracy theorists, that there was nothing there. It's not rigged. Hillary Clinton won by millions of votes. Yeah, she did win by a lot of votes, but the process wasn't fair. The process was rigged. And in 2020, I think it's even more egregious than 2016, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely sees that way, because I'm having a hard time believing Joe Biden that no one was excited about. I mean, you showed some very funny videos of these people at Joe Biden rallies. It's like, I came here for the T-shirt. Like, you were on the ground saying you didn't see anybody, you didn't see all these Biden signs, you didn't see all these Biden people. Kamala Harris dropped out before Iowa, and now she's the VP. Like, it just seems very orchestrated and very manufactured. But let me ask you this point blank. Did the DNC, maybe you haven't investigated this enough, but did they cheat in the general?
Honestly, I might be on the wrong side of some of your audience, because I've looked into it. I've also been balancing 3 other investigations I'm doing, but I don't see this widespread election fraud cabal that some have been pushing. I was in Pennsylvania on election day covering it. I think, there was definitely isolated things in Pennsylvania, in Michigan. I think in Texas, there was some stuff, but I think it's giving the Democratic Party and a little too much credit, honestly, to think that they could pull off a coordinated conspiracy cabal to move. I mean, you're talking millions of votes, hundreds of thousands of votes in the key states. I think what actually happened is, number one, Trump people don't want to hear it. He ran a shitty campaign. If he would have just ran the same campaign against Joe Biden that he ran in 2016, he would have won, even during a pandemic. He listened to idiots telling him, no, don't run against Biden on the TPP or NAFTA. Make him a socialist boogeyman. Make him an agent of Bernie Sanders. And nobody bought that. Joe Biden is a Republican. Yeah. So I think that hurt Donald Trump. Focusing on socialism and this and that, like his RNC speech, which was crazy. There was actually one good part where he hammered Biden as, I think it was a line like, he hugged you and he hugged workers during the day, and then at night he sold them down the river and sold their jobs offshore. That was how he beat Clinton, and he could have beat Joe Biden that way. His first debate performance was like a domestic abuser. It just was a bad look. So I think Trump lost in that regard. I also think, frankly, the numbers are the numbers. Like, more black people came out in Atlanta. More black people came out in Detroit. I know that, some other channels have cited, they have the evidence. I haven't seen it, and I've been covering this for 4 years on the ground, election fraud. I don't think Biden won through the DNC cheating. I think Biden won because Trump ran a really shitty campaign. I think Biden won because there's a deadly pandemic with, at that time, about 300,000 people dead, and Trump didn't do anything. Frankly, if Trump would have done what he did yesterday in August, right, publicly demanding $2,000 a month, signing some executive order to, whether it was constitutional or not, to give people more money, he would have won. It's not hard.
No, it's not hard at all. I mean, if he would have I agree with you there. And there's also, just as you say, the way the structure is set up, it's easier for either party to cheat in their own primary because they're running their primary. They're overseeing their primary, where everyone's overseeing the general. So it's harder. It's harder to do that.
And by the way, let me just interject, because like a lot of these people that, even progressives who I like, who were pushing this, didn't answer a simple thing. If all these votes were flipped from Trump to Biden on the national level, how is it on the same ballot Republicans won those House seats or won those Senate seats that they weren't expected to win? So you think that literally on one person's ballot, votes were fraudulently flipped from Trump to Biden, but down ballot, they won the Republicans won more seats than they were expected in the Senate, a lot more House seats because Nancy Pelosi's an idiot and the Democratic Party is terrible. So it just doesn't make sense. And the recount in Georgia, I mean, there's 3 recounts. So if you think there was fuckery with the machines, there's been 3 recounts. And I was in Michigan. Unlike some of these people ranting, I was in Michigan. You kind of get a temperature for the electorate. Frankly, there was a lot more Biden signs than I saw Hillary Clinton signs. And there was in 2016, and there was a lot more issues actually that not so much favored Biden, but went against Trump this time. For example, the farmers that voted for Trump in 2016 really fell out of favor with Donald Trump because of his trade war, particularly in Michigan, in Iowa, and other states. I mean, I talked to rural people in Michigan from Trump country, and they were not so happy with Trump because his direct stimulus to the farmers was a bureaucratic mess that they didn't get. His trade war that he rationalized by, I'm going to just give them a $13 billion stimulus. Again, they had to go through like NGOs to get that money and they never got it. So I think there was a lot of things in there that, a lot of factors. And, I even see it in your comments. People don't like what I'm saying. They think I'm gaslighting. I'm just a journalist, so I can't make up shit just to satisfy the zeitgeist. I don't see what I did. Rudy Giuliani's absurd. Sidney Powell's absurd. They're pushing that there's a Venezuelan conspiracy here. I do think there's really suspect shit. And Lee Camp has done great work on this. You have on our election machines, 100%. I think Tim Canova in 2016 got robbed. I think he won down there, and the ballots were destroyed. Nobody went to jail for that. So there is legitimate election fraud. I just don't see it in the general election.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of questions. I mean, it's fair questions to ask, but there's also the question, like you said, they flipped these votes, but not for the down ballot stuff. I mean, how did Trump get more votes in 2020 than he got in 2016? If all these corrupt votes were how did that happen? Like if they really just flipped and cheated all these votes, they would have just given him, if they had that much power, they would have just said, oh, he only got 50 million votes. Here's a landslide. He got crushed. Why would they even,
and by the way, again, this is I'm not criticizing people that don't go out there, but because I have the fortune of Status Coup and people supporting us financially, I was in Philly during the election, and I actually spoke with Republican poll watchers that were inside that building. That Rudy and Trump were ranting that they're not allowing us to watch, they're not allowing Republicans in there. I spoke with several people that were in that building, the Philadelphia Convention Center, that were Republican poll watchers. One was wearing a Trump hat, and he was just like, I don't know what they're talking about. This place is fucking packed with poll watchers. Yeah, we're not on top of the people voting because they won't let us because of the coronavirus. But there was tons of Republican poll watchers, and this narrative was going out there that they're not letting randos in. Yeah, they weren't letting Corey Lewandowski off the street in because that's not how it works. You don't just, you have to, it's a process to be approved to come in and be a poll watcher. So they weren't letting Corey Lewandowski and Trump's Pam Bondi and the rest of these morons just come in off the street. So then, you know how this is. It happened in the year 2000. Remember when all these, they called it the Brooks Brother riots, when all these Republicans were flown in to basically physically encroach on the people counting the ballots in, I think it was South Florida. And they just started concocting this bullshit that they're tossing ballots, and none of it was true. So yeah, I think that there's what you want to be true, and then there is what's true. And I think that, I respect some progressive outlets. I just think sometimes because the Democratic Party is so corrupt and we all hate the Democratic Party so much, we let that blind us to situation by situation, and we allow it. I think some outlets allowed their blind hatred for the Democratic Party, which is accurate and righteous, to not let them actually look at the facts in this particular situation.
Yeah, Ben Bradley said it. Beware the stories you want to be true.
Yes.
You want this to be true. You really want this to be true. And so you're going to find evidence to support that. It's working backwards. But all right, before we let you go, because I know you got other shows to do to talk about this, where do you see this? I mean, what do you see this new information that you've put out there on the Intercept? How do you see this playing out? I mean, just hopefully they're hoping it gets buried over the holidays, and then we're coming, we'll just let Trump keep saying crazy stuff or whatever. I mean, if Trump gets wind of this, he's going to talk about it, I would imagine. So, I mean, how do you see this playing out? Because the Vote Any Blue or Blue liberals do not want to hold the Democratic Party accountable at all. We do, but everything's our fault. I mean, literally, it's an alcoholic home where you're in an alcoholic family, and you're like, mom and dad are crazy drunks, and your siblings go, stop causing problems. And you're like, I'm not, like, that's who these liberals are, that, like, don't criticize AOC. Oh, really? She just voted for this bullshit stimulus plan. So, like,
I would reframe it that they're all at brunch eating mimosas, and they say, let's not rock the boat.
Yeah, right. They're like, oh, you're getting so mad. You're cooling down my quiche or whatever they're having. Like
my avocado toast.
So, yeah, how do you see this shaking out? I mean, this new I mean, this is pretty powerful stuff you're bringing out there. It's even more evidence of the suspicions we all already had from 11 months ago or whatever, of the financing of the shadow app. How do you see this playing out?
I think how this plays out depends a lot on how the progressive movement, well, let me rephrase, how the progressive House members choose to operate. I think we're having this force the vote debate, and a debate within that of, do the progressive House members, which I created a graphic, you got the Democratic Party in the House has currently a 4-seat majority. That's it. Pelosi needs 218 votes to get reelected as Speaker, to pass legislation. She ain't getting any votes from Republicans. She only has a 4-seat majority. I failed math, but I think 7 progressives, Ro Khanna, AOC, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, Ayanna Pressley, Pramila Jayapal, Mark Pocan, who's for Medicare for All. I think 7 is more than 4. And then you have 4 more joining that 7. You got Cori Bush, Jamal Bowman, Mondaire Jones, and Marie Newman, that all ran on Medicare for All. And I know Cori Bush personally. So do the progressives in the House want to play ball, long-term ball, to get committee assignments and,
they want to get invited to the DNC prom. They're just worried that they go to homecoming.
Right. I mean, listen, we could debate issues like, I love Jimmy. I'm going on with him. I appreciate it. I don't agree with them on all things. I agree with them on force the vote. And I think progressives need to chill a little with the purity. Like, it's okay if you don't agree 1000%. If you start moving away from like Medicare for All and progressive things, that's a different topic. But we're not children. We're not in high school. We don't need to rant and rave that we're all sellouts if we don't agree 1000%. I get in trouble with my audience that I'm not pure enough. But I think on this particular Iowa caucus story, it really depends on what are progressives, how are they going to act? How are they going to operate? Do they want to sit here and wax poetic about long-term movement building and organizing, or they want to fucking battle? And let's add possibly Nina Turner joining that. So if they want to battle, then they should be ranting and raving about what I just reported from the Intercept, because for the future, we're not getting a progressive in the White House, no matter if we run better campaigns, if we have more grassroots support, if we have more volunteers, if we can compete financially. You're not getting it if it's rigged. So it really, you ask me what's going to happen. What I ask, I doubt she's watching, AOC, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, Ayanna Pressley, Cori Bush, Jamal Bowman, Pramila Jayapal, Mark Pocan, possibly Nina Turner, who I'm pretty sure I don't need to ask. I think she would be on top of this. Are you going to speak out on this? Are you going to demand a real investigation? Are we going to say we need a special counsel? Forget Mueller. We need a special counsel to investigate what, where, and when was the DNC doing during the Democratic primary. Biden ain't going to like it, but that's okay. So my answer is a lot of this depends on, Are the progressive movement going to fight, even if they won't get it passed right away? Like this whole force to vote thing that people are saying, we shouldn't do it because it won't pass right away. I mean, I wasn't there. I don't think Martin Luther King was like, let's not protest because it won't pass right away.
Like the guy who stood in front of the tank in Tiananmen Square, like what's his step two? I don't know that I think it's a little too performative.
It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
So to answer your question, it's up to the progressives in Congress. Unfortunately, my answer is, then no, they're not going to speak up because they're worried about their committee assignments, and they don't want to rock the boat, because we all know the civil rights movement was successful because Black people waited until the South started treating them better, and then they protested, right? That's when protests always happen, when everything's going great. So right now, we're in the worst pandemic in 100 years. We're about to have the worst economic collapse, worse than the Depression. We're also on the brink of civil war. But those aren't three big things. So we'll wait until the committees and the assignments and a memo, and then we'll ding. So
well, I don't think. I want to be clear. I don't think it's all up to them. I've been telling my audience personally. I'm a white guy. I don't want to tell BLM leaders what to do. Like, obviously, it's their movement. But for the last 4 or 5 years, even before George Floyd, I've been out there covering these protests. And at a certain point, you need more than electoral politics, and you need more than bodies on the ground. Imagine, Graham, if that massive mass mobilization we had, I mean, hundreds of thousands of people around the country that were protesting after George Floyd, Breonna Taylor. Imagine if with their legs, with their signs, with their voices, they were also withholding their wallets from Amazon, corporate banks, fast food, Whole Foods. I could go down the list. It's not an easy thing to organize. Some people are poor, can only afford. Walmart can only afford. So we understand. But it's not just electoral politics. It's not just pressuring these progressives, who I think are in many cases proving to be paper tigers. But if we start organizing in terms of actual more than one day boycotts of Amazon, and it's not just Amazon, but you get my point. Yeah. To me, that's like, I told my audience, this is a great example. For a long time, the Washington football team was a Native American slur.
Yep.
The rich white owner said, over my dead body, am I changing the name? There was an economic mobilization to pressure FedEx and other sponsors.
Yep.
It got so hot that FedEx and other sponsors had to go to Dan Snyder and say, either change the name or we're pulling our money.
Yeah. That happened overnight, man. That was like, and when FedEx said, we're pulling our $500 million licensing deal on FedEx Stadium, suddenly Dan Snyder didn't have a problem with the history of the Washington Redskins. And suddenly we got this Washington Football Club, the most generic thing I've ever heard in my entire life. But I've used that example too. And it's like, people need to really, there needs to just be a mass boycott or general.
And it's all connected. It's all connected. I think you and I have spoken about it. In France, for example, the Yellow Vest movement, part of why that has been successful, and they actually got concessions from Macron, is they're not afraid. They're not desperately afraid to lose their jobs because they have healthcare. Yeah. So if you lose your job in France or other European countries, it's not wonderful, right? But like, you have basic security as a citizen. Here, it's part of the system. That's why they don't want Medicare for all. That's why they don't want to give you anything, because they know if you have a safety net under you, then people are going to get a lot more pissed off, Graham. People are going to get out onto the streets. Frankly, I'm not telling people to be violent, but it's inevitable. At a certain point, people can't take it anymore. And there's right now the ballpark 50 million people without healthcare in this country. Not to mention however many more have insurance and can't afford to use it. So, I think that a lot of things need to happen at once. And frankly, with all due respect to AOC and these other people, they're talking like, well, we're not hearing this from official movement leaders. Well, when did the progressive movement become a meritocracy where you need a special badge to get AOC's blessing on something? I mean, whatever. Jimmy's a YouTube host. He rants. He's angry, whatever. But Jimmy has as much right as, National Nurses United or whomever is the official movement group to demand these things.
Yeah.
We could debate his approach. I think Jimmy has become too much of the topic rather than the idea. But I think we need a general strike's not going to happen overnight.
That's not
right.
his fault. That's all these people just couldn't admit. Oh, this is a good idea.
Right.
Like,
and let me tell you something. If Jank came up with the idea, these same people against it would be,
of course,
ducks in a row.
Absolutely. That's the problem. It's their little fragile ego. So they're not real progressives. They're not indie journalists. They're not real activists. They're just doing it to say, look at me, look at me, look at me. And at the end of the day, they wish they could all get MSNBC jobs. So it's like,
well, some of them are.
Yeah.
I think Sam Cedar just joined the Peacock network.
Yeah.
Whatever. I'm not to me, I'm not interested in the high school bullshit. I just do my thing. I report on with Jen, my co-founder. I don't particularly care to rant and rave against other people in our sandbox. I watch some of them. I don't watch others. I know it gets clicks to rant and rave against others, but to me, the most important thing is we have the power. We do have the power because let me tell you something. I tell my audience all the time, we live in the United Corporations of America, Graham. It ain't Joe Biden making the decisions. It's Jeff Bezos. Mm-hmm. It's not Kamala Harris. It's Bill Walton. It's the Waltons. Yeah. It's not any of these people. They can only go as far as their donors will allow them. So should we try and pressure Biden to the left, which is a joke? Or should we hurt Jeff Bezos's quarterly profits?
Yeah.
Should we prevent them from their buying 3 more yachts? Because I will tell you, Graham, Bezos and these people, they're not blue or red. They're green. That's their ideology. Mm-hmm. So if they feel their green is threatened, they're going to tell their servants, the politicians, give them some type of UBI, give them something, give them more health care. We can't take this. So, those are my thoughts and we'll just see, but I'm going to continue what I'm doing. And I appreciate the Intercept. I could have another discussion with you about corporate media because I've had like Jen and I with Status Coup have had so many stories that in a sane world would be picked up like very quickly. And these corporate outlets just keep rejecting them. And unfortunately, we go to the corporate outlets because they have more reach than us at this point. But they keep rejecting and rejecting. I had this story. I brought it to a few places. They didn't see anything there. I talked to Ryan Grimm. Within 2 seconds, he's like, this smells really fishy. So, we need to do multiple things. A general strike, a corporate media strike. So get your rest during the holidays, folks, because we have a lot to do in 2021.
We're going to boycott a lot. Jordan, tell everybody where they can follow you and Status Coup.
Yep. YouTube.com/Status Coup. Unfortunately, they like to hide us in a cave. I'm sure you know about that.
It's a great cave, really nice Google cave that we're all in.
Yeah. So YouTube.com/Status Coup. And we're at Status Coup on Twitter. And we are a membership-based independent reporting outlet. So you can become a member and support our in the field journalism, statuscoup.com/join.
Excellent. Jordan Chariton, thank you so much. Check out his article in the Intercept about the DNC cheating in their own primary. We'll have you back on the show, Jordan. Thank you for taking the time, brother. Have a great day.
You too, man. Thanks.
All right. Thanks for watching, everybody. Please hit the like button, the subscribe button. Go to patreon.com/Graham Elwood and rockfin.com/Graham Elwood, where you can support the show. Also, I have a Bitcoin wallet, a Bitcoin Cash wallet, and an Ethereum wallet in the show notes. We're taking cryptocurrency. I have a Coinbase affiliation link. We're going to be getting on some other exchanges. So that's how you support the show. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. YouTube is unsubscribing us at an alarming rate. I have a PayPal button at GrahamElwood.com. I even have a Venmo at Graham-Elwood. There's a lot of ways to support our show. We are getting crushed by YouTube. We've dipped under 73,000 subscribers because of YouTube. Thanks for supporting what we do.